Let's talk to Liberty Laura, who's joining us now live and on camera. Good morning, Laura. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, Austin.
Hey,
Thanks
thanks
for
so
having
much.
me. I feel
Yeah,
bad for Emily Oster.
wait a minute. Wait a minute. The woman who wants to call for pandemic amnesty after she was talking about all these horrible things that should happen to anti-vaxxers, you feel bad for her?
I agree to all of those points. Well, as you and I were talking about, I feel bad for her in the right that she has no idea what was coming for her, which is what we'll talk about. But I was a fangirl. I got pregnant with my first son in 2019. And, I had some women in my life to talk to, but I really felt like I was like alone. Like I had no idea what was going on. And there's so many things that you've heard about your whole life growing up about pregnancy and about childbirth. And they say, be careful what medicines you take, be careful what foods you eat, be careful what you do while you're pregnant. You can't fly at a certain point. And there's all of these things, and you want to protect your baby and you want to protect yourself, but you also feel like you're going to vomit all the time. And so you need some resources to help you feel better emotionally and physically. And so Emily Oster has a series of books. She's an economist at Brown University, and she's also a mom. And so she wrote a series of books breaking down these pregnancy and parenting myths by using data and statistical analysis, and really lays it all out there in a beautifully well done series of books. And her first book is called Expecting Better. It was her top performing book out of the three. And that's the one I read. And it's about, can you eat raw sushi while you're pregnant? And basically the answer is yes, the risk is low. Can you eat deli meat while you're pregnant? Basically the answer is if you choose to take that risk, the risk is low. And she really
Wait,
gives
there's
empowers
a
women
risk of
with
pause. There's a risk of eating deli meat when you're pregnant?
all of these things. You didn't know, right? You didn't know, but now you do. And when you're pregnant and you become a mom, your amygdala, the fear center in your brain, grows. And so you need data like this to be able to operate. Also, Austin, Mexican shredded cheese. There's like a listeria risk with shredded. All of these facts are in my stuffed in my already
Okay,
busy
good
brain
to
now.
know.
But
Good to know. All right. All right. So she was a hero to yours because you were reading her books about pregnancy, and there was all this really good information in there. So you kind
Mhm.
of idolized her, and then the pandemic happens.
Yes. Yes. So I had followed her since 2019. I had followed her on Instagram and read some of her newsletter content. And then the pandemic happened. And it happened slow, right? I think it was a slow burn for most people. And I was watching the content she posts, and she does this regular thing that she's known for, where she does Q&As on her Instagram during her 6 a.m. morning run. And I was watching these Q&As, and 2020 happened, and we were all pretty scared, and at least at the first part of 2020. And I remember I was one of those people that was like washing my groceries when we came home, in April and May. And but then that year happened in 2021, and most people we knew had COVID. I was pregnant at that point, so I said I'm not going to get a new vaccine while I'm pregnant. And I was watching these Q&A questions, and they started to dramatically change from how I was thinking about things. And they started to say, like, well, we've kept our kids away from their grandparents for a year and a half now. Should we keep going at it? They refuse to wear a mask outside with us. And I'm like, well, you don't need to wear a mask outside. All of the data says that the transmission outdoors just doesn't happen. Emily, you must respond to this with the facts, right? And she never did. And that happened all through 2021. And then these parents were like, can I booster my 6-month old? And I said, these women are different than me. We do
Oh.
not think alike.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of responding with like, hey, the data actually shows that your healthy 6-month old didn't need the original shot and probably definitely doesn't need a booster. She really took this nonchalant approach, and it was just like, it's whatever you want to do, which was completely fundamentally different than how she had her claim to fame.
So she used to, when you were reading her books and she was talking about pregnancy and things like that, she was an expert on. She was providing real data and real research. But when it came to
Yes.
vaccination, and just a devil's advocate thing, she like a lot of people kind of have to rely on people who are actual experts in that field to say, oh, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
do that. But she didn't even provide data from those experts, is what you're saying?
Now, she would say kids are low risk. She would say kids in this category are extremely low risk for hospitalization and definitely death, but go ahead and do whatever you want. Now, of course, parents should parent how they choose, but I was reacting to this content much differently than her. I have a handful of mom friends who also watch her, and we were texting each other during this time, and we're like, what's happening to Emily Oster? She's kind of lost her level-headed approach. And there's this tweet that's going around now of hers, and I believe it's from 2021, and she was advocating for people to lose their jobs if they didn't get vaccinated. She said
Mm,
shaming people who won't get vaccinated will never work, but we should definitely force them to get vaccinated if they want to do things that they enjoy, such as work, air travel, etc. And so she tried to take this middle ground stance, and that's when I said I feel bad for her. She kind of got lost in like the balkanization that's happening. She tried so hard to safeguard her like moderate position on things. And I see a number of friends and family around me doing this. They try and safeguard, they try and be moderate, they try and stay in the middle. But the problem is that there is no middle because we all believe in different facts and different truths anymore.
mm,
And
mm.
so she got lost, and no one likes her because the left attacked her, if you'll remember, for advocating for opening schools in the fall of 2021. And now the right hates her for saying, please forgive us for every time we were wrong and shamed you for it.
Man, this is good stuff. If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking to Laura Lington. We're talking about the author Emily Oster, who Laura idolized for some time, really looked up to for her pregnancy information, and who really had a fall from grace during the pandemic. She was the author of the piece in The Atlantic, who was talking about why we need to have a pandemic amnesty. Now, on the good side of things, she can't win. Obviously, she's in a scenario where everybody hates her. But I mean, she does admit that she was wrong about schools. At least the left is coming out admitting it. The fact that, and this is what I've been saying, and not a lot of Republicans or right wingers are agreeing with me necessarily, but I've been saying that the fact that the left and the people on the left are calling for this shows that at least they're admitting that they made a mistake and that there were wrongs. And the whole school, the educational thing, a lot of people are going to dig themselves in. And I think I actually have a quote from Emily Oster here where she says, "The people who got it right for whatever reason may want to gloat." Yes, we do, of course. And then she says, "Those who got it wrong for whatever reason may feel defensive and retrench into a position that doesn't accord with the facts," meaning that the people who, advocated for keeping schools closed are going to say, "Oh, well, it was the right thing," or they're going to still believe that what they did was the right thing. So, I mean, it's going to be difficult for us to kind of figure out a way out of this that doesn't, just basically put us back to where square one, right? Where people are blinded on blinded on both sides, really, right?
Yes, and I agree. And that's the problem. And specifically, her piece is titled Political Amnesty. And if we look back at what does that word evoke in your mind, the word amnesty, usually people associate it with immigration, right? And so the last time we granted wide scale amnesty was Ronald Reagan in regards to immigration in the 1980s. What happened after that? However you feel about immigration, whether you're open, closed border, whatever, what we did not do when we granted amnesty was fix our systemic immigration problems. And those persisted. If we just grant amnesty after the pandemic, the people in charge who made the mistakes that were in a position to know better will continue. Those problems will persist. The way that they abused and neglected their power will continue. We cannot grant amnesty. We have to fix the problem.
Yeah, I've seen my wife and I were talking about the other day about this story about like a 91-year-old concentration camp guard, right, from World War II. And he was 17 years old at the time, but he was in the guard tower and he got convicted and he died in jail. I think he spent 2 months in jail before he died. And so we were kind of talking about this. We're like, should we really be going back and prosecuting people who, worked at these camps when they were
Right.
17? And we kind of got caught up in like this question about, okay, well, what if he was drafted and he was forced to do there? Is that different than if he signed up and did it? But, at the end of the day, he was a member of the SS, which, you don't volunteer to be an SS member. You have to join that crew. But, it's kind of along those same lines is like, we don't, if there is a Nuremberg 2.0, as people are calling for on Twitter, then
Yeah.
not everybody is Hermann Goering, right? Not everybody is going to get hanged at the end. Not everybody's Heinz Guderian, or not everybody is a top Nazi that needs to go and hang. But some do, Laura. So there are some people who committed great, great crimes against humanity. I mean, it wasn't as bad as China, where they were like, locking us up and like sealing our doors and things like that. but there were some terrible crimes that were committed. You know, that like there are people who are responsible, and the hope is that if the Senate is taken over by Republicans, Senator Rand Paul might become the head of the Health Committee, which would mean that he could have the power to
Yes.
do commissions. And I mean, these midterm elections are important as a reckoning in my mind. Wouldn't you agree?
Fauci will be very busy during his retirement if
Yeah.
that is the case. Um, so I was talking about consequences of what happened during the pandemic when another friend of mine pointed out when I was reading Emily Oster's piece, the most severe consequence for Emily and her family during that time was that her family had to wear masks during a hike. But to bring it back to her specialty, I had a friend who was pregnant with twins working in healthcare who was forced to get a vaccine to keep her job in maternity leave. And she didn't want to. And so she, in her mind, had to endanger the health of herself and her kids for the sake of her job. The pandemic put people, not the pandemic, politicians' reactions to the pandemic put people in those kind of positions. People were out of work. People had their health autonomy violated. People, women had to go into ultrasound appointments to discover that they had had a miscarriage and lost their baby without their husband there. I mean, these were severe consequences that happened because of the reactions of politicians who were in a position to know better. And so for some people, it's going to be really hard to get amnesty or forgiveness.
Maybe we do believe in reparations. Reparations must be paid. Liberty, Laura, you're always a great guest, and we appreciate your time on the show. Thanks for coming on and talking about your heroes that have fallen, this Emily Oster character. Tell us how people can find out more about your work. I know you've got I think it's a weekly newsletter that you write. It's a really great newsletter. You want to share that with our listeners?
Yeah. So when I was pregnant in 2019, I was working in Congress. I was working in the House of Representatives as a communications director. And after all of COVID happened, I quit that job and now run my own political news aggregation service. It comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. What I do as using my experience as a communications director is I go through everything online and pull the best of the best and a lot of underreported political news stories that you might not see through the mainstream media. That way you don't have to spend hours on Fox News and Reddit and Twitter and subjecting yourself to all that online violence. And instead you can get a succinct, summarized news brief for you 3 times a week. And you can sign up at billbrief.com. My newsletter is called Bill Brief. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, of course, with the CCP at Laura from Kansas.
She sometimes moonlights in making some awesome products for the AP for Liberty shop. Laura, thank you very much for your time and for your service in the cause of freedom. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. Did you like Liberty, Laura?